I want to talk a little bit about your sister, Wendi. As adults, before she married Professor Markel, how often would you talk with her?
I'd call my sister, I'd say about every 10 days or so we'd talk. I'd call her, but she was busy and she wasn't real good with the phone. So I would call her and she would always take a day or two to call me back. I spoke to her half the time when I called. Half the time she didn't pick up.
How often would you see her, again, pre-marriage? How often would you see your sister?
Not a lot. In 1995, I left to go to college. In 97, she left to go to college up in Boston. So it was pretty much, I would say, holidays, like every 3-4 months. Thanksgiving, Christmas time, sometimes during the summer. So maybe 3-4 times a year I'd see her.
There came a time when Wendi started dating Professor Markel, right?
Yes.
Do you remember when you first met him?
I do. I think he was in town, and I remember all of us going out to lunch. I think we went to a deli.
What did you think of him?
I thought he was a nice guy. I mean, he kind of seemed like all my other sister's boyfriends she's had in the past. I've never really had much in common with them. And she kind of seemed like the rest of them. But I that was pretty much it.
Now, after they got married, what was your relationship like with Professor Markel?
It was the same as before they got married. I mean, we texted each other on our birthdays. I don't think we ever really called each other or hung out. I mean, I would just see him when he came over to the house with my sister.
And how often would you see him and your sister?
I would say twice a year, maybe, or roughly around there, maybe 3 times a year.
In the years that Professor Markel and your sister were married and living in Tallahassee, how often did you come to Tallahassee?
I'd only been to Tallahassee. I was there twice, I believe, when her children were born. And then once when I was working in Alabama. I had a research fellowship, and I was passing through Tallahassee. I spent the night with them, and I saw them that time too.
When Professor Markel and your sister were married, did you still communicate with your sister about the same amount of time?
It may have been a little less, because I remember when she had kids, I mean, she had even less time. So I probably spoke to her. I'd call her, and then probably more times than not, she didn't pick up the phone. And then I'd get a call back a couple days later. So it was pretty similar.
Did there come a time when you became aware that Wendi and Professor Markel were having marital issues?
Yes.
What did you learn?
I took my sister out to dinner when she had come to town, and we went to the Melting Pot. And I remember her telling me that they were having issues, and it was pretty serious.
Did she tell you that they were going through marriage counseling?
Yeah. That's when I found out, and I guess that's what I was going to say, is like, have you tried to work things out? And that's when I found out that they had been in counseling for 6 months. I didn't know about it before.
Now, what were some of the issues, if you remember, that she told you they were having?
He was becoming very, very religious. There was becoming issues with diet and how she was cooking in the house. She wasn't really respectful he wasn't really respectful of her career. He would belittle her. He obviously seemed like he lost his eye for her, and she seemed like she'd lost his eye for him, and she wasn't happy.
Now, did she complain about violence or danger or anything like that?
Never.
Did she complain that he was not a good father?
No, he was very attentive to his sons.
Did you learn at some point that your sister was going to file for divorce?
I did.
And when you heard that she was going to file for divorce, how did you feel?
I felt bad for her. I mean, she was sad. I mean, no one goes to get married to get divorced. But she seemed like she spent 6 months in therapy with him, and it didn't change anything how she felt, and he didn't change how he was. And I said, listen, the kids need to grow up in a happy household. Like, they can't have fighting. They can't have a miserable mom who's unhappy. You need to have, the kids are better off growing up in two separate households where there's positive environment instead of negative.
Did your sister seem angry to you?
No, she seems sad.
How involved were you with the divorce proceedings?
I wasn't really involved with the divorce proceedings on the day-to-day stuff. I would definitely hear stories, most of which would come from my mom when I'd be driving to work in the morning or driving home. I would hear the latest update of what's going on. But I would say probably 20% came from Wendi and 80% came from my mom.
How did Wendi seem to you during the period when they were going through the divorce proceedings?
Extremely stressed, very stressed out.
How did your mom seem?
She was upset because my sister was stressed, and it was almost like a telephone game. Like my sister would vent to my mom, and then my mom would be venting to me.
In general, was your perception that the litigation was very litigious?
Yeah, I did learn that. I mean, he was fighting over bicycles and all kinds of nonsense, and it seemed not to end.
Now, were there some big issues like relocation that were issues as well?
Yes.
Let's talk about relocation. Did there come a time that you learned that your sister filed a motion to try to relocate to South Florida?
I did.
And do you know why she wanted to relocate to South Florida?
Primarily, it was because she had no family in Tallahassee, and she had 2 young kids, and my parents lived in South Florida. I lived in Fort Lauderdale, and she wanted to be closer to family, and she had a better, more secure job for her career in South Florida.
How did you feel about the idea of your sister and the boys moving to South Florida?
I thought it would be great. I mean, I hadn't lived in the same town as her since 1995, so I thought it'd be great to have her in town.
How important was it to you?
I mean, it wasn't real important to the point like I thought about it all the time, but I mean, if I thought about it, I'd be happy to have her back home.
How important was it to your mom and your dad?
To them it was very important. They wanted her to come back because she had no family in Tallahassee.
And what was your understanding of what Professor Markel thought about this relocation effort?
I knew he was against it, and he wanted her to stay in Tallahassee with him.
Did you learn at some point that the petition was denied for relocation?
Yeah.
And when it was denied, how did your mom feel about it?
My mom they were very disappointed. They were unhappy.
How about your sister?
She wasn't that disappointed, I guess, because she's a lawyer and she knows, what's the probability of something like this happening. And she said it was a long shot. She said she wasn't really expecting it, but it was worth it just to take a shot to see if it would happen.
Were you angry?
No. I mean, it didn't change anything in my life.
Now, we've seen some emails regarding converting the boys to Christianity. We've seen some pretty out there emails from your mom. Do you recall seeing those emails in this trial?
I do, yeah.
And do you recall whether you saw those emails when they were written, back when they were written?
Yeah, I would get forwarded to me all kinds of stuff, for sure.
Did you come up with any of those ideas?
No.
Now, on some of those emails, we'll see that you respond, "I like it." Why did you respond that way?
Well, my sister tried being really nice to Danny. It got her nowhere, and he was being really litigious, and he was looking to give her a hard time. And I thought that I thought it was a way that she would go ahead and give him a hard time back and kind of push his buttons the way he was trying to push her buttons. So basically, if he's being a jerk to you, just be a jerk back and see if maybe he'll stop. So I didn't think any of those things she was actually ever going to follow through with, but I thought that it would really push his buttons. So I thought, why not give it a shot?